Welcome to the Caritas Consciousness Project. I'm Gloria Coelho, and Caritas is a nonprofit organization dedicated to the evolution of consciousness, both individually and collectively. We used to be the Caritas Center, but when we went virtual, we decided to change our name. We promote this evolution by offering presentations and interviews and classes and study groups on subjects relating to consciousness and also healing, which we've been doing for the past 18 years, since 2003. In 2019, that was when we began recording our presentations. And I think we're approaching 70 videos. All of our video recordings are viewable through our website, which is caritascenter.org, and many of them on our YouTube channel. We're loading a couple each week. And that YouTube channel is just called Caritas Consciousness Project. Our program is made possible by the support of our members and donors, which we treasure. If you enjoyed tonight's presentation and would like to make a donation or become a member, you can do that on our website, caritascenter.org, and we really appreciate it. And now let me introduce tonight's guest speaker. Jeff Salzman is the creator of the Daily Evolver podcast, now in its 10th year, where he applies integral theory and spiral dynamics to the news of the world. In the early 2000s, Jeff worked with Ken Wilber to create a series of seminars on integral theory applied to various disciplines, including psychology, spirituality, and business. In 2007, he co-founded Boulder Integral, a bricks and mortar center for integral study and practice. He has a master's degree in Indo-Tibetan Buddhism from Naropa University. So welcome, Jeff, and thank you so much for making the time to be with us this evening.
Yes, thank you so much, Gloria, for inviting me, and welcome to anybody who's listening at any time and space, and especially to those who are joining me live here tonight. I am always thrilled to talk about my passion, which is apparently the same as yours, the evolution of consciousness. I see that's your tagline.
Yeah.
And we've been in the same spheres for quite a long time. You've been doing, Gloria, the Caritas Center. I've seen Steve McIntosh present there, who was an integral philosopher. And you have several people I see in the library who have talked about spiral dynamics. Mm-hmm. And what I have done is, it's just what I sort of do naturally. And I've started a podcast, and I'm actually doing a second podcast now called This Week in the New York Times, a post-progressive look at our progressive paper of record. And I, attempt to look at the news through an integral lens. And I guess I'd stop there just long enough to invite whoever would like to share what you already understand about that, and what you're sort of looking for. I see you responded to the creative power of the culture war, and I'd love to know what you're thinking and why you're here. So if I could even be so bold as to call on people, and if you want to pass, you can do that. But let me just start with the upper left corner for me, and that's Sharon. Sharon, would you mind just sharing a little bit about why you're here?
I guess mainly the email from Gloria, so the text that was in there, and then you had like a 3-minute video. So that kind of drew me in. And I've seen spiral dynamics with some of Gloria's other presentations, but I've never made one of them. So this is, if you're going to touch on that, this is kind of my first exposure to that.
Okay.
And I've done a lot of very different sessions with Gloria, so I'm not completely new to this, but I might be pretty new to what you covered tonight from what I understand so far. So.
All right. Perfect. Thank you. That really helps. And
Yeah.
welcome. Natalie, would you be willing to share?
Oh, sorry.
There you are.
Yeah, there I am. So, I'm really concerned about the culture wars in this country, and beyond, really, and this tendency that seems to be trending in a way toward authoritarianism. But on the other hand, I follow teachers and commentary that gives me some hope that that as a society, at least in the United States, there is a burgeoning shift taking place toward more of a consciousness of the let's see, well, just of the wholeness of everything, and I'm working on it, but it's
Join the club.
we all are.
Yeah.
It's challenging. And Sharon, I think we've been in some dream groups together.
Yes. Yeah, you looked familiar immediately.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
nice to see you in this setting too.
Nice to see you too.
Welcome, Natalie.
Thank
Joe,
you.
Joe, you willing to share a bit? You're
Unmute.
There you
Let me
go.
unmute. I got it. I'm kind of interested in the lack of understanding of the complexity of everything. I mean, with the simplicity of social media and the simplicity of evaluation of everything that's going on, from the environment to the economy to social interactions, there just seems to be a real lack of the complexity and the grabbing hold of simple solutions. And so that's
Yeah. The simplicity beyond complexity. I always love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's basically, this kind of discussion gets me out of my wheelhouse.
Okay.
So it's good.
Yeah, all the better. Yeah.
Thank you.
How about you, Nancy? Want to share just a brief moment about why you're here and what you're drawn to?
Yeah, Jeff, my name is Nancy McKenna now, but I used to be Nancy Harvey. I used to work a career track when you
Oh,
were
for
the
God's
VP
sakes.
there. Yes,
Nancy.
yes. So, and I recognized your name. I've taken a couple amazing courses with Gloria and the Caritas Consciousness Project over the years, and just been exploring spiritual stuff for a while now. And just your topic sounded so intriguing because it really is difficult right now, but people being in such polar places and just just like at each other's throats, even like with my own family and difficulties, but yet knowing, like, from things luckily that I've taken with Gloria, like reading the spirits book, and like knowing that we're all soul, like we have a soul and it's connected to the spirit and God, and like people are at different levels, but yet, you see the difficulties and the really difficult things going on in the world, and your heart aches. But then you think people are at different levels and they have their own soul journey. Anyway, and I just heard about your topic today and it sounded so intriguing. So I signed up really quick, and I'm a little bit late because I just got home from work. So,
Well, I'm glad you did, Nancy.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, good to see you again. And yeah, welcome everybody. Judith, I see you're not on video, but if you'd like to share, I'm happy to hear. I think we all would be.
I'd be glad to share. And if I saw a way to get myself on video, I'd add that, but I don't see it at the moment. So I am basically an activist in favor of the environment and our survival, but I'm also intrigued with doing activism in a new holistic way that comes out of this shift in consciousness that I feel we in this group, it sounds like, are all interested in. I have studied Wilbur's books, and also I like that concept in spiral dynamics that at the present time we have on Earth people at all different stages of consciousness with their own frames and their own organizational ideas. So it behooves us all to understand how we can talk with one another, work with one another, listen to one another, and understand a little more. I'm also a big believer that that we're moving toward enough people who have made this shift that there's hope for the planet. And I think keeping that optimism when we see the interrelationship of all of us and of everything, there's a feeling that we can do this shift and make the world survive. Help.
Yeah, hallelujah.
Yeah.
I like that part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
Okay.
it.
Well, good. That helps me to feel into who we are tonight here, and let's have a good time talking about this. And I think what might be best is to just do a quick overview of the basic thesis, which is that consciousness and culture are evolving. And it is evolution creates goodness, truth, and beauty, but it does so in a way that is often not pretty. And it's doing so today. The culture war is actually fruitful in the larger context of evolution, which doesn't like when things are kind of easy. There's not a lot of juice and movement. So that is actually a big story that integral philosophy wants to tell. And it's actually a story that I think, and I love that you folks have a spiritual understanding and a spiritual dimension, because it's really there. And actually, it's a great myth, if you will. That's what Edward O. Wilson, the great evolutionary biologist from Harvard, called it, and he meant that in the best way. That evolution, at 13.8 billion years ago, something arose out of nothing. Let's just pause there. And that something has complexified over the past 13.8 billion years ago. If you want to talk complexity, Joe, that's just built in, and our reach always exceeds our grasp. And that's always been true in a certain way. And I love that Holmes Ralston talks about that there are really three big bangs. There's the emergence of energy and matter, which is what we just talked about. There's then the emergence of life. And as far as we know, that happened here on Earth. I'm forgetting how many billions of years ago, like 4 billion years ago, we started some planktons and that sort of thing. And over time, it has accelerated to create us. And human beings are the nexus for the third great Big Bang, which is mind, and self-conscious mind that is conscious of itself. And that is its own thing. This is where we get into consciousness, which is the individual expression of this mind, and culture, which is the collective expression of this mind. So that brings us to spiral dynamics and evolutionary theory, developmental theory, if you will, human developmental theory. And that is that this consciousness, individual consciousness and collective consciousness, continues to evolve. And it has evolved and is continuing to evolve through stages. And I'm actually going to share the screen and do just the basic spiral dynamics overview. So I will do that by pressing this button. then I will press this button. And I think you see that. Are you seeing this chart? The spiral dynamics chart? Good. And I can, oh, sorry. I go over here and I can, so what you see is that there are 6 first-tier stages of development, 2 second-tier stages of development, and, actually endless third, and it goes on and on and on. Who knows where it goes? So evolution continues, but where we are, and this is, I don't necessarily want to argue strenuously for the accuracy of this. I will argue for the spiritual transmissiveness of it and the explanatory power of it. And so it jives with Claire Graves and Maslow, and a lot of developmental psychologists have found come up with these same stages. And it starts with, we'll go to the first value level, if you will. And that's infrared. That's beige in spiral dynamics. I'm using colors from Ken Wilber's Aqua model, so don't get hung up in the colors. They are kind of confusing and unnecessary. But this first stage is archaic. This is where you wake into consciousness. This is where the, caveman, cavewoman looked into the still pond, saw the reflection, and had the first great realization of self-consciousness, and that is that I am. That is, I exist, separate from the rest of the world. That it's a subject-object split. It is a terrifying realization. We all had it as children. There's at the time when we have these, when we're infants, we have this oceanic connection to mother and father and family. But at some point, and I can remember it myself, I was in my crib and I was playing with the mobile of the birds. So there's the cardinal and there's the bluebird and there's the yellow bird. And I realized, oh, those birds are them and I'm me. And we go from there. So this is that awakening stage. The second stage is the tribal stage. And in history, this is online about 50,000 years ago, dated from cave paintings and the beginnings of culture, fertility symbols and that sort of thing. And the tribal stage, and this is like early family or early childhood, where we see the world as enchanted and that it values ritual, deep community, family is the sort of unit of this tribal stage. The individual is subordinate to the group. And, there in the world, there are very few purely tribal cultures left. There are some lost, that are untouched, presumably. I think there's some controversy around that. But there is that strata in all of us. These strata don't go away. They get overlaid. Sometimes they get repressed, but they don't go away. And that's really important. So the next stage is the warrior stage. And this is the world and history of, the beginnings of clans and ultimately empires that are based on power. It's just simple as that. Rome was an empire power, red. Greece in many ways. Egypt, Genghis Khan, all of the people, this is a big category of human development, of 10,000 years worth, where might is right. So we say egocentric, vigilant, aggressive, impulsive, ruthless, courageous, determined, powerful, online 15,000 years. And this stage in human beings is when we realize I am powerful. And it's like in teenage years. And so there's some comparisons that we can find there that are useful. So we can feel into that red egocentric part of ourselves. And it's important and powerful. And, I think about when I was a kid, my egocentric self, I remember the moment actually, when it was all of a sudden not okay for my mother, who was young, I had a young mother, to bathe me in the kitchen sink while her girlfriends were there. It just wasn't okay for me. So I had a big tantrum, that was over. And that's that I am powerful thing. And that's still very much online. We see it in, gang culture, and in the worst of the autocracies are mafia. It's basically that sort of thing. I would argue that Trump is in many ways operating out of that stage of development. He's got capacities in others, but his heart is at that egocentric stage. Next is the traditional stage. This is in history when, it happened in Rome, when all of a sudden all the gods, the gods are superheroes at Red. They're like big, power gods. At Amber, there's a realization, and it happened around 2,000 years ago all over the planet with Buddhism and Zoroastrianism and Christianity. And it was this idea of a transcendent God that really took care of all the, vengeance is mine. All this ruthless clan wars of the Red stage of development, or I want to smooth that out. I'm in charge, and your reward is in heaven or in nirvana, to the escape from the suffering of this earth. And this is a traditional stage of development. And traditional is all over the place on the planet. There are many, many, many traditional cultures. They're ethnocentric. They value rules, roles, and discipline. They're trying to get civilized. Might is right is superseded by this transcendent good and evil. They have a faith in a transcendent God or order, socially conservative, online 5,000 years, and with the first inklings of it coming out of the Israelis. And so that's the traditional. And this is where we're really getting into the players and the contours of the culture war. There are people in this country, about 30%, maybe 25%, the MAGA people for sure, the God and country people who have served notice actually through the election of Trump and through, the abortion laws in Texas, all sorts of, they're fighting the culture war. And their argument is that you're not going to go forward into the future without us and without the values we hold. And so hold that thought while we move into modernity. And modernity is the next stage of development that arises out of traditionalism in history. And by the way, traditionalism in terms of an individual human being, and I look at it myself, is when I was a good little Boy Scout and Girl Scout, and I went to church camp, and you just want to be good, and you want to be faithful and obedient and that sort of thing. So that's amber, or traditional. And then we move into modern, and modern is kind of I am somebody. And modernity arose with the scientific revolution. And it's this realization in first person, in terms of my own consciousness, that I am here to achieve. I am here to create. And that the state, the warlord, the king no longer has sovereignty. I am sovereign in my own breast. And I treat other people that way. And then the third person, it's science, technology, rationality, and also the destruction of the natural world, which modern culture has destroyed about half of the natural world in the process of building the modern world. And it's tripled lifespans, and it's the creation of the indoors, and it enables us to fly all over the place and have fruit in the winter. But every stage has its huge upside and huge downside. And I remember, to bring it back to our personal life, and you probably all have this moment, where I lost my faith in God. And I started reading Ayn Rand, for God's sakes. And when I was 14, 15, 16 years old, completely secular, hardcore atheist, and materialist. And that's where a lot of people are now. And it's an amazing move from traditional to modern, because in traditional, God is everywhere. you would maybe even argue that God told me to do this, and that would be a reasonable argument. In modernity, God is gone. God is nowhere. It's banished. You cannot argue in a meeting that we should do this because God spoke to me in a burning bush. That's not going to get you anywhere. So that is this, complete disconnect between these two worldviews, and they're very much online, both of them today. And to just round it out, we move to postmodernity. And postmodernity is the progressive, it's world-centric, it's psychological, it's very interested in subjectivity and in people's inner worlds, each other's. We get really interested in cultures. We want to bring back the people who have been marginalized by the previous stages. And if we look, red tends to divide the world, or the warrior stage divides the world between predator and prey. Whoever is more powerful is in charge. Amber divides the world between saints and sinners, or traditionalism, saints and sinners. Modernity divides the world between winners and losers. And postmodernity wants to bring back all the people who have been left behind, all the sinners, all the losers, and bring them into the world. And so this is pluralism, equality, relativistic, sensitive, civil rights, environmentalism, world-centric, online, 150 years maybe. It's never, these stages don't happen in lockstep. There are people in ancient Rome who were completely modern in many ways, and of course there are saints and sages of all stages that are spiking into God knows where. So these are probability clouds. These are centers of gravity. They're not hard, fast stages, but you can see the trajectory. And the trajectory is, added complexity, that we're actually able to see more and take more into account at every level. And then there's, according to developmental theorists, there's a big move out of these first tier memes. Again, green, the postmodernity hates modernity, modernity hates traditionalism. These three all hate each other. Warriors kind of the ones who are on the make, they're sort of exploit anything. And the culture war is between these, this postmodern, traditional are at the extremes, and then the moderns tend to move one way or the other. So that's where we are currently in our culture. And there is, but there is a movement, a next stage that is arising that we call second tier or integral. And there are two stages of integral, the teal or yellow in spiral dynamics, and in both systems called the next stage turquoise. So what happens as we move into an integral stage is that, first of all, we get bored. Boredom is the great engine of evolution. Human beings hate being bored. And so we get bored with the relativism of green. We get bored with the sensitivities of green. Sensitivity is a huge achievement in human consciousness. But, like everything, it can sort of start feeding on itself. And there's just a realization, if you take the perspective of various people in the culture, and there's a part of you that doesn't want to fight the same way, that you want to realize that most people actually are operating out of goodwill, even if they see the world completely different than you do. And so there's a move towards seeing that the whole system is first of all, you see that evolution is happening in culture. You see these stages. And you see that every one of them has a place, and that every one of them has a gift. And so we see what we call natural hierarchy. And natural hierarchy is like, an acorn grows into a seedling, grows into a sapling, grows into a tree, into an oak, in that order. And that is not subjective, that there's an objective order to things. There's a way in which history has unfolded and continues to unfold. Why would it stop? It's not going to. So we see that. That's cool. And then we start looking at systems of systems. And this is what you're talking about, Joe, there's a simplicity beyond complexity, because you realize that there are, I always love this formulation by, I'm forgetting his name. He's a Polish philosopher in the 70s who talked about what he called the law of the infinite cornucopia, which is that in our times, and he's talking about the 70s, this is 50 years later, and this amazingly more true now. But he said, in our time of endless infinite information, there's enough information to create any argument for whatever reason you want to create it. So we realize that there's a certain stage at which we realize that the perspective that I'm taking is one perspective of many possibilities, or several possibilities. And as I look at this perspective and this worldview and that worldview and this perspective, there's a expansion of consciousness that happens where I no longer identify with my native perspective, which was probably green, or at the postmodern stage. I start identifying with the space within which all perspectives are arising. And that's the integrative move of this second tier. That's why it's called integral. That the idea is to actively integrate the stages of development that have come before, that are still, the strata are still in your body. You can feel them. The chakras are very aligned with this, actually, and we can see it in culture. And that, so just from a practical perspective now, if we just get down to the culture war and the perspectives that are online, we want to start looking at things, the current events like Afghanistan, abortion, wokeism, racial justice, climate, all of it, in a way where we understand where people who are postmodern are coming from. They have a definition of racism that actually is different, for instance, than people at modern or people at traditional. And that every one of these stages actually has something to say. There are people, again, of good faith. There are hustlers at every stage too. But there are people of good faith who actually think that the world will be a better place if their worldview wins. And that is the sort of definition of what's going on in these, particularly these last three stages, the first tier, the traditionalists, the modernists, and postmodernists. They all believe that if once the world becomes the way we are, then everything's going to be okay. Once the world accepts God, or goes back to the old values, then we're going to be fine. Once, moderns will say, once everybody becomes rational, once everybody listens to the science, then we'll be okay. Postmodernity says, once everybody becomes sensitive to the suffering of people who have been marginalized and left out and unseen, and once they need to be brought into a baseline of decency, that once we do that, then everything's going to be okay. And integral would say that all of those have I want to say piece of the truth, but they all have a full truth. They just, we have to hold it in a consciousness that is able to allow they call flex flow consciousness. They call integral consciousness, is often referred to in developmental theory as flex flow consciousness. That's Robert Keegan at the Harvard developmentalist. Flex flow consciousness, where you can look and feel in to the earlier stages just effortlessly. You can argue their positions better than they can. And that is a certain kind of power and excitement that brings on a new level of wisdom that moves us into, let me go back here a second, to the difference between teal and turquoise. Hang on here. So teal, I always love how Ken Wilber, the difference he makes. He talks about how teal is head above heart, and that turquoise is heart above head. And that's the way I experience them as well. It's like at teal, or at the first stage integral, I start seeing evolution itself. I start seeing this pattern. I start seeing it in myself. I start categorizing, and it's like the Google map. It's like I look at history, I look at culture, and I could turn up the resolution. I could see way more stuff. I'm able to, feel into other people and cultures and perspectives. And then the next stage is this turquoise stage, which is the second stage, which is where you realize, oh my God, this whole thing is alive. This whole thing is alive. Oh my God, from the Big Bang 13.8 billion years ago, there's a teleology to this thing. And so we talk about turquoise as seeing the world as alive and evolving, holistic and cosmos-centric. One of the ways that we can look at the development of consciousness is the move through from egocentric, which is that warrior stage, ethnocentric, the traditional stage, and then modern becomes world-centric in the exteriors. So modernity can see the globe, it can see maps, it can do technology, it can do ships and shipping, and creates the modern world where it's integrating the globe in many ways, often conquering and exploiting it too. And by the time we get to green or the postmodern, we are world-centric in the interiors. We feel into other cultures. We see the suffering that's happening in the natural world. We feel into that, and that's important. And then at integral, we're actually cosmocentric in the sense that we're not only seeing the systems of the world, we're also seeing the systems of the cosmos, that there's this unfolding of goodness, truth, and beauty that has been happening since the beginning, and that we actually, even though, ultimately it's going to kill us, there's a way in which we can expand to a transpersonal self that is more, which is not so identified even with this particular form in this particular life, but in capital L life. You people get what I mean. So I'll stop there. And first of all, just any response or any questions or comments about that, or anywhere you might be getting hung up or whatever. Anybody?
Question, it's Sharon.
Yeah, Sharon, please.
Yes, so you mentioned the chakras, and are you familiar with Anodea Judith?
No, yeah, but that rings a bell, but no.
She's written at least 2 books, and I think it was her first or older book talks about something similar to this. It was my first kind of exposure to the concept of things evolving, and she talks about us being in the power chakra and evolving in a current state of evolution to the heart chakra. And she would say, that this started like in the 1960s or something like that. So not to equate the two, but just any comments on that?
Yeah. Well, there's a way in which absolutely you could look very much at the difference between the sort of modern sensibility it's head oriented. It's scientific, it's rational, it's figuring things out. It's amazing achievement of humanity. But then there's a time at which, and again, boredom, there's a part where it starts turning on itself, and people feel alienated and people feel unmoored. We're a bunch of protoplasm on a rock spinning through the universe. I mean, you can see why anxiety and depression is, just rampant in people with that worldview. And so people finally get tired of it. And so there is a move towards the heart. And that absolutely, the 60s was a big pivot point in the developed world. So this was when, the counterculture came in. World War II, to go back, a couple decades before, World War II was a huge turning point too. Actually, in a sense, to modernity, because what was previous to that, really, the first half of the 20th century was the developed world. The developed world at that point in the early 20th century, they were traditionalists. They thought that their race, their country was the best, and that it should bestride the world. And so there were 2 world wars fought over that issue. And at the end of it, we were standing in such destruction as humanity that there was literally a realization that we can't do this anymore, and that's growth, So this new thing comes online, and so we get these couple roaring decades of after the war, and of course the children are always exceeding the expectations of their parents. Let's put it that way. And so, the children of the greatest generation, the World War II generation, come online, and they don't want to hear anything about that anymore. They want to move on to peace and love and psychology and primal screaming and meditation and drinking of all these various wells that are non-rational. And for me, I talked about how every stage of development that happened for me, I lost my religion and became modern. There was a time when I had a spiritual experience. It was after reading The Road Less Traveled, actually, which was Scott Peck's book which is kind of a intellectual argument for the existence of God that worked for me, actually. So, I came to Boulder, and Boulder in the 70s and 80s was, 90s, it still is very much where you can kiss all the frogs of, these various traditions and teachers and all sorts of modalities for exploring one's interiors. An amazing thing. And that, look at how mindfulness and meditation has become, every YMCA is teaching it. Everywhere. It's just an amazing thing. So that counterculture move in the 60s was, that's where, post-modernity really started coming online. Civil rights, feminism, animal rights. Now that's all fluoresced into anti-racism, gender fluidity. Every stage continues to evolve, actually horizontally, if you will. So we have... Go on.
Yeah, that was my second question, is how much overlap is there between the stages? Because it seems like it's somewhat considerable.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, look at ourselves. I mean, part of what is, causes anxiety and also the culture wars is that there are several stages online at the same time.
Okay.
That wasn't true 15,000 years ago. Everybody was at the warrior stage or at the tribal stage. I mean, of course, there were huge battles between agriculture and the hunter-gatherers. I mean, it's always been stage warfare. And then, the traditionalists come in with the kingdoms and all that good stuff. Modernity with the nuclear bombs, for heaven's sakes. So every stage has, does that. So one of the reasons that the culture war is so powerful now is because this new stage of development, this postmodern stage that arose in the 60s, didn't exist before. There was Oscar Wilde, there were Mark Twain, there were people who were sort of proto that, but in terms of a real cultural movement, it didn't exist. So now there's all these stages online at the same time, also within us. And we can feel them battling within us, the traditional, maybe the sort of gets choked up over the Pledge of Allegiance or the, flag. There's the modern who just wants to look at the science, doesn't want to, get rid of all the superstitions. There's the postmodern who's sensitive, but then, homelessness, all these issues, Afghanistan, how do we actually sort it all out? This is part of the fruitfulness. This is why, you can't sort it out. In a way, you have to fight and love it out. And this is, this is another point I would make, is that evolution is powered by fighting. It is. It just is. I mean, I don't approve of it. I think that the world ought to have been constructed differently, but it is. And so that's just part of the deal. And also love. Love makes the world go round. And so there is there's, in the culture wars, we're actually doing both of those things. And from an integral perspective, that's got to be okay. And that's one of the moves that I think is really important as we move into an integral view, is that we no longer have this idea that this shouldn't be happening. It's awful that it is. All these talking heads, all this consternation. I can't stand it. And somebody needs to be blamed, And if they only saw it my way and our way, this is a real, when we move into integral, we really have diversity, in the sense that we want to include diversity of worldview, not just diversity of creed, color, gender, as long as you agree with me, which is the postmodern view. It's supposed to be a mess. Yeah. There's no, the idea that we're going to get out of the mess, it's almost like our own lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I swear I'm going to get it together one day.
This is
almost,
this
I'm
is
67 and a half. I realized yesterday, I actually did the math. I'm 67 and a half.
This is Judith. I just want to insert something here that Ken Wilber always insisted on, that we embrace and transcend these earlier stages, so they're always with us. And I was once witness to a dialogue between cutting-edge physicists from academia and Native American elders talking to each other about a holistic view of nature, our place in it, the cosmos. And they had the same concepts, even though theoretically the Native American worldview was archaic, if you look at it on this system.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one person in a group that was hearing this dialogue and participating in that way, just by being listeners, was offended by the idea of spiral dynamics. She felt insulted as a Native American to be considered dealing in magic or magical thinking. And she completely rejected the teal and turquoise worldviews momentarily, so this happens. But anyway, to see these physicists and these Native Americans delighted in each other's wording for the same concepts that they were believing in and living in, it was quite a process.
No, it's very interesting, and it's really one of the things that, even if we look at the evolution of integral thinking and talking and the way people see it and use it, developmental theory, it's going through a metamorphosis right now. The idea of even stages, first of all, green or postmodern is allergic to that. And it ought to be, actually, because if you look at at history, these ideas of hierarchy have been certainly the source of great suffering, and colonization and oppression and all of that stuff. And so green wants to get rid of that. And so any kind of a hierarchy is going to have a hard time getting through in that way.
Because they're distinguishing between a dominator hierarchy
Yeah.
and a merit-based hierarchy.
Yeah. or a natural hierarchy.
Or
You know,
natural.
dominator hierarchies is where I'm better than you are, and you know, and then you're better than they are, and whatever how we want to rank all that. And it's, you know, the patriarchy. It's human history is not pretty. A lot of dominator hierarchy. So Green's intuition to get rid of that is really an achievement of humanity and ought to be respected. And but then there is the natural hierarchy. But so once you get rid of the dominator hierarchy, you really sort of deconstruct all of those triumphalist stories of history and see through them. Then you're ready to, you know, embrace natural hierarchy. And natural hierarchy, and this would be my response to people who feel insulted from these what we might call earlier stages, you know, is that from an integral perspective, magic is not, magic is a real thing, actually. And so we actually want to bring forth we want to re-enchant the world.
Yes.
Modernity has disenchanted the world. Again, an achievement of humanity. The enchanted world was pretty brutal. You know, we want to re-enchant but demystify the world at Integral.
Mhm.
So that brings magic back,
Yeah.
but in a way where it's not, we don't have to throw virgins into the volcano anymore. You know, the superstitions, the evil spirits, those kinds of things. Actually, we want to bring forth everything in the whole spiral, this whole hierarchy, if you will, or natural hierarchy, everything except each stage's claim of superiority.
Mhm.
That's the only thing we want to leave behind,
Mhm.
you know? And so magic, yes, we want to talk to the trees. We want to feel Brother Moon and Sister Stars and the bears and the, you know, I mean, we don't know how fabulous humans are going to be. You know, our future ancestors, 2, 3, 4 generations from now, God, not to mention 50 or 100. I mean, good Lord, they'll look back on us as, I think right now they'd see it as the age of ideology. I mean, look at how they suffered over these, you know, ideologies. I don't know, but it's not going to end, and we're not going to iron it out, and we're not supposed to. So, you know, we want magic. We also want, from the next stage, the warrior stage, if you will, the great myths. You know, we want, you know, this is where you get into Joseph Campbell, the idea that I am in an enchanted world. Everybody I meet, I'm supposed to meet. Everything that happens to me is dripping with meaning. You know, we want that back. And that's been, you know, modernity has taken it away momentarily, you know, for a few hundred years. But, you know, the materialist vision is, we can see the downside of it. We can see first of all, the natural destruction, and also the soul destruction that comes out of it. Do we want to skip that stage? I don't think so. You know, was it supposed to happen? Apparently. But it sure wasn't pretty, you know, pretty in some ways. You know, we like the skyscrapers and we like, you know, 3 meals a day, but not pretty in others. So this is, you know, Integral just starts being friendly to the whole process. And you know, it doesn't see like an 8-year-old is not a defective 12-year-old, that these earlier stages are 100% precious. Everybody is. Every stage, every culture, 100% precious. And yet we could see that there are capabilities that are lost, magic, and capabilities that are gained, rationality, you know, science, technology, sensitivity in a way that is different than indigenous. It's a new kind of sensitivity that comes online at postmodern green. We can just see all those. We can taste them. You know, we can feel their their fragrance, smell them. I don't know. You know what I mean? So that's that. You know, I wouldn't argue with somebody who's offended by it, because they're supposed to be offended by it. Integral is going to have to deal with that. Going in some ways, it's been good that we're just a bunch of eggheads off in the margins so far. But you know, trot this idea of cultural evolution out into the current mediaverse, and it's going to be scandalous. You know, and it already is. We can see people who are reacting to it. And again, welcome to the arena.
Mhm.
Anyone else?
Well, this is Judith again. I have a kind of preoccupation with Occupy Wall Street, which was a very green, non-hierarchical, non-dominating movement, spontaneous, etc. But there was another part to it that we're still emerging into or trying to learn about. And that was how do you strategize? How do you have leaders? I remember that the Occupy Wall Street group in Boulder suggested that a dog that was present in their circle could be their leader. So there was like this reluctance to get organized because everybody was equal. And I've been in organizations, particularly women's organizations, that have that problem of not being able to choose leaders or support leaders because of this overriding belief that everybody is a leader, let's say, or nobody should be, or something.
Yeah, that's the fundamentalist view. I mean, every stage has their sort of fundamentalists where they're just really going to go with that insight that everybody's equal and that, you know, hierarchies are bad. But you see, they get stuck in an infinite loop. You know, I mean, how many circles have I sat in my life in Boulder, in my years at Naropa, in these frozen circles where everybody was afraid of taking any kind of a stand because there was nothing to be said about anything. And there's a certain, I'm not sure that one ought not have a complete exhaustion with that in order to be worthy of moving forward, if you will. And you know, with at some point, again, we want the natural hierarchy. And this is where, you know, from an integral perspective, I want, and this is a practice I have, if you will, I want to see that everybody I meet has some level of genius, you know. And I look at my friends, and I have one who's just a great, she's a gifted mother. I have one who is an amazing, like an artistic cook. Others, you know, just whatever it might be, so that there's a natural, again, flex flow of leadership. So that when I'm cooking with my friend, and we cook together a good bit, I'm subordinate to her. I don't want her to do what I want. I want to do what she wants. And so, you know, that's the sort of granular view of that. But we want to write that large so that they're, you know, we could get organized and do something, which is the next stage out of the sort of relativistic muck of fundamentalist postmodernity.
Yeah.
Anybody else? I mean, we could talk about, you know, issues, politics.
I think Joe.
Joe?
Yeah, I don't look at these levels as definitive, sort of like an individual has reached a level of one of these. At any given topic or moment, we as an individual could be in any one of these levels, depending on our comfort level and relationship at that moment. So the difficulty is, it's like getting on a plane with people that you don't know whether they are vaccinated or not. You don't know what level of evolution they are of consciousness, have any idea. I mean, years ago, I got on a bus to go to someplace in West Virginia. It was at night, and the young man sitting next to me pulled out his Bible and asked me if I was saved. And I said, I'll be happy to listen to you if you'll listen to me. But, you know, I mean, I had no doubt about what his level of evolution was. Not very high, but that is okay.
Yeah.
As long as we could talk from whatever level we were at. That's the issue that I'm wrestling with.
Yeah. Well, that's I think of something that Claire Graves, again, the researcher and father of spiral dynamics and one of the big developmental theorists, talked about integral as being the universal donor stage. That's those are the people who, and this is what he found in his research. They're just sort of comfortable with everybody. They get where everybody's coming from. They don't have, they're more interested, they're more curious than critical. And that's, you know, that's a big move. I'm not there all the time, God knows. I'm plenty critical, but I catch myself more quickly than I used to and become curious so that I can look at somebody who just said something that, you know, got my goat. And instead of, how could you say that? It's like, how can you say that? How can you think, where are you coming from? Because I know you're of goodwill. I know you really want to make the world a better place for your grandchildren. And what are you seeing? And that's so good at that point. Yeah. And that's why, you know, integral becomes the universal donor. And that's, you know, Claire Graves, there are others who have estimated that, you know, in the developed world, maybe there's 5%, 3%, whatever, you know, there's people who do various tests and try to come up with numbers of people who have that consciousness capability. And at some point, and it's rising. I would say Obama was an example of that, just had a natural fluidity with worldviews. I've just been reading his autobiography about his presidential years. He's just constantly taking the perspective of other people. And, you know, just looking at this, when he's making his decisions, he sees what this one's saying, this one's saying, this one's saying, this one's saying. And, you know, there was an amazing phenomena of him becoming the president of the United States. Oh my God. Too much, too fast, apparently, because we had a certain reaction to that, apparently, with Trump. So, you know, but from, and as you say, Joe, it's, again, these aren't hard, fast stages. We all are, it could be at different stages at any given time, often under stress, you know, so we could be, you know, doing our big business thing, and all of a sudden we lose a lot of money, or we make a bad decision, or we don't get our promotion, and then we were going to go back to the family and get Sucre, you know. So, you know, these kinds of things, we can start seeing that and seeing our, you know, everybody I love Ken. He talked about, these aren't stages, these are probability clouds. And yet with that said, you can still see that various cultures have a bigger cloud, if you will. I mean, sometimes I think rather than stages, we ought to think of these as like an archery target. So there's the, you know, it just continues to grow out. And that also helps us to see that we're holding what is in the center. So that's some thoughts I'd have on that.
I think the challenge for integral is to know how to communicate and talk to the other stages, you know, and as you said earlier, the finding the genius in each person is pretty genius in itself, you know. Yeah. Because everyone has something that they can do uniquely, you know.
And they generally love to tell you about it if they really feel like you're listening. Mm-hmm. People love it, mm-hmm. You know. Yeah, it's irresistible. Like Martin Luther King said, it's built into our evolution. We just can't resist it being seen.
Martin Luther King said, you have to outlove the other.
Ah, that's good.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. And also this idea that, you know, you can't expect from them what you're going to give them. I mean, you can't, the person at the higher stage of development is more responsible for the relationship than the person at the lower stage of development, just to put it bluntly.
Yeah.
Same with children and parents. I mean, it's either outrageously arrogant to think that we are the parents or grandparents of the world. That's how I feel. You know, in some ways, grandparents better than parent. Maybe it's my age, but in that, kids are supposed to fight. They're supposed to compete. They're supposed to make mistakes. They're supposed to, you know, and I'm not as charged up. Parents get a little more hooked into it. Grandparents have a little more equanimity about it, and love all of them. Just want to make sure they don't hurt each other too badly. That's not a bad, you know, paradigm for living one's life as an integralist. But, you know, again, terribly arrogant unless it's true. I love that. Yeah. Natalie.
I think the challenge, one of the challenges is to bring forth your own ideas to someone, to people who are obsessed with power and money and feel and are totally immersed in that feeling that they get from having a lot of power over others and money that can bring them thoroughly into the materialism. And I just don't know how much trying people at the integral level can and should do to help them along, or well, perhaps it's even impossible to help them along if they're immersed in that particular stage. And how many attempts are reasonable?
Yeah, well, fair enough. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I think that, you know, the way I see it is I'm here to love, but I'm here to fight too, actually. And who I want to fight is the fundamentalists at every stage, including the materialists, the capitalists who think that that's the only thing, the people who are in love with money and possessions and materialism. I want to resist that. I don't necessarily want to condemn people like that, because it is a stage. I mean, people get all busy with stuff and accumulating, and that's where the power is. And I can understand that. I can even remember that stage in my own development where I would sit and literally with a Sears catalog and furnish my mansion, you know, with the, you know, the early American and the, you know, the Moroccan and the, you know, it was just, I bling stuff. I wanted stuff. Some people are there and they're there in their 60s and 70s and 80s, and they never really go beyond that. And, you know, we want to vote against their interests. We would, you know, we want to inveigh. We want to get in the political arena and fight that kind of thing. We all make our different decisions about it, but the fighting and loving is a good paradigm, you know, or it's sort of a good polarity, if you will, that if you're not doing both, you're, you know, probably not as happy as you would be if you were, not to mention effective.
What's the best way to fight?
Well, you know, for instance, you know, to talk, I have a friend, I have several friends actually, who are very materialistic, and they're all about their house and, you know, their clothes and their travels and that sort of thing. What can I do? You know, I love them. I do. I listen. I don't, you know, I actually try to get a little bit of a buzz. They're going on a cruise, and so it's and they literally go on these cruises with like Liz Taylor. They have crates of clothes so that they can wear this one for this show and this one for that. And you know, it's all about the labels, and they're going to be with people who are in that same milieu. And I find it interesting. I find it interesting. Now, the way I fight that is, you know, I'll vote against, you know, their interests. I'll vote for, you know, higher taxes. I'll vote for, you know, carbon tax or whatever, you know, politically, and then sort of otherwise enjoy life. You know, we can only do so much. I have friends who are so, these are other friends who are so, bummed out. You know, that's one of the features of post-modernity, is that the green stage of development is all triumphalist stories have been proven to be bunk, you know, so there's nothing to believe in anymore. And then the world's going to hell. And it's like, when I was at Naropa, it was like the highest good was to sit with the suffering of the ever darkening world, you know, and excuse me if I'm not very inspired by that. And by the way, have you read Trumpa in The Great Eastern Sun, The Rising Sun? You know, I mean, but at any rate, it's a disposition of postmodern. And I have friends who, and what I really sort of, here's where, and I wonder how to fight this, because I really do object to this one thing, where they are terrorizing their kids. You know, that we're not going to have a planet in 10 years. And they're just completely convinced of that. And it's a fundamentalist climate religion, in my opinion, that is as fire and brimstone as the Christianity I was taught when I was a kid, you know. But, you know, I don't know how to, you know, I just sort of listen and try to point things out. I don't know. It's hard to know what to do in this world.
Maybe we just work on ourselves. I mean,
yeah.
the more of us who really try to evolve as best we can in this incarnation, you know, the better the planet will be. I do know, just from my own informal studies, that more and more people are trying.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. No, and I actually, this is where I love integral theory and Ken Wilber and others who have this, you know, would typically be rejected by modernity, but is a spiritual understanding that there is the evolution is perfecting, the universe is perfecting itself in some way. And that there is actually what do they call it? The morphogenic field around the planet. So this is the field of thought and collective mind that is also growing around the planet. And that it's like Ken Wilber said, you know, people thought modern thoughts for 300 years before the French Revolution. You know, the part of what we're doing is just thinking integral thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's actually something. And again, this is where in this re-enchanted world where I am on this journey of what you're talking about, Natalie, of growth. You know, it matters, and what I think matters. And what I think matters to me and my own karma and my own destiny. And it also matters to the morphogenic field of humanity. And so I want to pay attention to what I think. Not that I do all the time. But again, I'm catching myself sooner than I used to.
Well, it's the, you know, it's the journey from the head to the heart. And also the journey from fear to love.
Yeah.
We all experience fear.
Yeah.
The trick is to be quicker at catching ourselves when our thoughts are fear-driven so that we can switch over to love-driven. Right?
So well said.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the things that is part of this developmental theory of the tiers, of the first 6 stages being the tier 1 and then integral becoming tier 2, is that all tier 1 stages are driven by what Claire Graves said were deficiency needs.
Mhm.
This idea that something's wrong, it's fear driven. We have to fix it. We've driven it into the ditch again. You know, this condemnation of humanity in general. You know, and that second tier is creativity driven or love driven,
Mhm.
and that is a whole different ball game. And yet the gravitational pull of fear thinking, oh my God, in first tier, everybody, I mean, turn on any station and it's about hooking your nervous system into some fear story so they can sell you some products and raise their Q scores. You know, that's modernity. That's the wheels of modernity in there too.
Yeah.
But Jesus,
Very
I mean,
smart.
it's swimming upstream to, you know, just consciously bring the love, bring the love. You know, I think there was a movie by that title, but it's a conscious choice and not always the default choice
Right.
in our world. The morphic groove is still very much fear driven on the planet.
Not the conditioned choice.
Yeah, not the conditioned choice. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So,
So
any other
I
questions?
don't want to be too cynical, but I'm really, I mean, we're talking about a theory of evolution of consciousness. I mean, I think evolution is going to take care of some of this, you know, just selectivity. I mean, the Darwin Award is going to go to a lot of these folks. And I mean, that's what I keep falling back on. I can't change stupid, but so much. And so let's just, I mean, let them die. I mean, we just got to go to a whole new generation of people that are at a higher level of consciousness. And
Yeah.
until we get there, there's only so much we can do.
Well, I
That
forget
might be a little cynical, but that's the way I feel.
Well, I'm trying to think of who the great philosopher, Ken Wilber quotes him, but progress precedes funeral by funeral. You know,
yeah.
it does. I mean, I can see the limits of my own evolution. I did a show today on the New York Times thing, and I was talking about an article by John McWhorter. And I don't know if you know John McWhorter, but he's a Black intellectual, anti-racist, actually. He's on the conservative side of things in that. He just wrote a book called The Religion of Woke. But he's a columnist for the New York Times. They just hired him, and it's a surprise hire. But he's a linguist, and he was talking about the new pronouns. And typically, you know, the pronouns are a big flashpoint in the culture war. As is, of course, woke and racism and all of that stuff. But he's interestingly, and this is where I find him interesting as an integralist, he's in favor of, you know, the language evolves, language changes, and new pronouns are coming online. And we want to have a way of welcoming people who don't want to fit into binary categories. And it was a really, really wonderful argument. And I realized that for myself, in my world, I'm probably not going to introduce myself with pronouns anytime soon. Maybe I will, you know, maybe I'll grow into that because I think humanity will in some way or the other. And he talked about the various ways that might happen. But this life, you know, you get your 70, 80 years. I've done all I can. You know, I grew up in the Steel Valley of Western Pennsylvania in the 60s and 70s, you know, a little Christian boy. And I've gone as far as I'm going to go. And so, you know, funeral by funeral, the world turns. And I see myself as part of that. I see myself also, I can sort of pinpoint the year when I stopped growing technologically. I just didn't get social media. I tried, God knows I tried. I've hired people to do it, but I have zero interest in it. It's like nothing, no receptors for it. But, our generation's kids, grandkids, yes. So, it's fun to see your own limits and to see the blessing of death. Get to get recycled. Yes, Nancy. And then Sharon.
Correlation, and people mentioned it a little bit, touched on it, about the correlation of, again, like our soul's journey, what we're here for this time, what we're supposed to learn, how we're supposed to evolve. And then people, unfortunately, like on this planet, are in all different stages. And unfortunately, we're living with each other, and it's very difficult. Not that I feel like I'm some great, but I don't know, just that spirits book, Gloria, just made me think about, just the levels, and people are, and then, and then we'll come back and we'll learn more of what we're supposed to. And some of the stuff we're suffering from now has to do with karma or whatever that and I really believe that, but it is really difficult sometimes to be, with people at different stages and to try and live with it in some kind, and try and come to a place where you can accept it and live on and live your own life. But I think what you said, Natalie, was good about just, trying to work on yourself and evolve, and hopefully, and again, spread the love if you can. But that's been really interesting, because I didn't really know too much about spiral dynamics. I heard about it before, but I think I'm going to, it helps a little bit to kind of allay some of the angst around it all. Like, why are all these cultural wars and all these people like against each other, and people think this, and again, I'm thinking, well, how can you think that, but then they're just at a different level. But then I try and think, okay, well, also, their soul is at a different level, evolving, and who knows how many times we come back until we ascend, thousands, people say, maybe, it's just fascinating to me. But this kind of helps me a little bit, I don't know, maybe like understand or just accept it a little bit more, even though it's difficult to live in this place where it's so polarized. But if you can kind of understand people at these different levels, and then maybe I don't know, not that I'm a great evolved person by any means, but it's kind of helpful to know.
To really, as a practice, to identify your political opponents, and to, make it a practice to where are they coming from? What are they seeing? What are the people who are anti-abortion thinking? What are the people who are anti-vax thinking? And in some cases, they're both thinking that they're both coming from that stage that is, leave me alone. Get your hands off of me. They're actually traditionalists in the sense of they're pre-scientific in their hearts. They don't necessarily want to think, they don't want to let go of the enchantment of their world, where a life is begun at the moment of conception, and that life has a karma, and they don't maybe use that term, but that God made that happen, and there's an intention around that. And so you just feel into that, and sort of the natural antipathy that, us liberals sort of have a natural antipathy to the corporate world, to the corporate state. They have an antipathy to the state, to the government, just naturally. Just maybe it's from his history, where they were the people who heard the hoofbeats of the king's men come to take their sons and daughters, So you just feel into, I can see why people don't, they feel like, all of this, Fauci and all of the media about COVID, oh my God, all the safetyism. It's like, don't you realize that God's taking care of things? They resent this, they feel it as oppression. So, this is a practice to feel into these worldviews that are, you know, just I have reflexive, you know, they're my enemy. I have to fight them, and they're stupid and wrong and bad and must be stopped. Well, that's not so fast, at least, you know, maybe, but not so fast.
Sometimes the gift is to know when to be quiet, you know, when not to say anything.
Man.
Because there are people who really feel so threatened if you disagree with their worldview that it's not worth arguing. You know, as you said earlier, you just love them.
Yeah,
Fine.
exactly.
My spiritual teacher many, many years ago, his name was Rudy. He said that for many years in his early life, his practice was to each person he would meet or encounter throughout the day, he would work within himself. He would open deeper and deeper within himself until he found something in that person he could love.
Oh my goodness.
Right? And he said he did this all the time. You know, it was his practice. And he said, I did it for years and I finally learned to love myself.
Oh, wow. No, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's that move to love,
Yeah.
you know, from fear, from separation, from condemnation to curiosity and siblinghood
Yeah.
and, you know, faith. You know, that's a good one from traditionalism, just faith. I have a lot of faith now. I used to have hope. Now I have faith.
Faith
And
is
I have
better.
faith in emergence. You know, I have faith in the system that I see apparently unfolding in front of me and through history. You know, why would that stop? And I also have some faith, and this is, you know, I don't have proof for it, but smart people that I know think they have proof for it, of, you know, life beyond this life. The Jeff stream of karma or consciousness that, you know, again, a cosmocentric view of the world that I'm working on, you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that I love about integral theory is that, and this is Ken Wilber's aqua theory, he talks about spirituality happening in first person, second person, and third person. A lot of life happens in first person, second person, and third person. These stages unfold. There's a first person realization at every stage, and there's a second person, the way we deal with each other, you know, at each stage, and then there's what we build in the world, the sort of technological world of each stage. And that in spirituality, the first person of God, if you will, is, you know, my exploration of my inner world.
Yeah, I am God.
Yeah, exactly. Of my own consciousness, of this individual Jeffness, and to see how, you know, thoughts and feelings arise on their own, under their own power, and just that whole meditative exploration, really, contemplative exploration. And then second person is the God of the Creator God, or in my case,
The I thou relationship.
the I thou relationship, absolutely.
It's so
And finding
important.
it in other people, and also in terms of some divine other.
And that is really important because it evokes devotion,
Yes.
right? Which the first person doesn't.
No.
No, I am complete. I don't need anything. I don't lack anything. And that's true. But the I thou helps us because it evokes devotion, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And we are seen, you know, and we see another and can relate to that.
And we're not alone.
Yeah, exactly. There's a line from a poem that I love called Beautiful. The poem's called Beautiful Signor by Cyrus Casals. He's a young poet, won some big award, I forget. But this book, he's gay, and he talks about this love affair that he had with this Moroccan man. And it's about being in Morocco, and one poem called Beautiful Signor is about their love making as the night wears on, and the smells and the curtains and, you know, of the city, the Marrakesh where they're at. And the line I remember is, all night long, this lover's engine, this Pegasus, seeing and being seen, seeing and being seen. You can't do that by yourself,
Right.
So that's just an important dimension of reality, actually.
Mhm.
And then the third person is spirituality in terms of the natural creation,
Mhm.
the web of life, the trees and this, the bees and the bears who, just the whole world manifest reality. And that's all of those, every stage of development specializes actually in one or the other of those spiritualities. But at Integral, we actually want to integrate them all and have them all.
Yeah.
So, I try to work on that. Yeah, Natalie.
So a minute ago, you were talking about God. Would you please define what you mean by God?
Yeah. I don't know. Okay. Well, actually, here's how I personally do it in terms of second person. So God is spirit in second person. Okay. So this is the loving intelligence. This is a personification of the loving intelligence that permeates the universe and is seen as another being. It could be God, it can be goddess. I actually personally, I grew up as a Christian, so God was always like, actually God is in early religion it's Big Daddy, it's like, love me or I'll kill you, and so I was always afraid of God. Jesus I could deal with, and that's why we have Jesus. Jesus is a way of actually relating to the divinity. Evolutionarily speaking, it was right on schedule. So I could do that. But even that, at this point now, I see my divine other, my second person practice it's like I have been assigned to this group of, I almost see them as Roman senators. Only it's women, it's men, it's people of all different, it's like the bar at Star Wars. There's all these beings and they're assigned to me. And actually, there's a bunch of them, but there's 3 or 4 where if I ask them a question, I won't get the answer necessarily right away, but I'll get the answer. It's really pretty amazing. And if I ask for guidance, I'll get it. If I don't ask for guidance, I won't. It's amazing how reliable it is and how little I do it. It's ridiculous. But that's so God's, I'll leave that to other people.
Yeah, it's
I
a
like
heavily
these people who are sort of, I'm their
laden
charge.
word. Yeah. In our culture, it has
A lot of baggage.
A lot.
Yeah.
It does. But, when I listen to a traditionalist who is filled with the love of Jesus and God, I get that. I'm happy to get that. I'm happy for them. I don't want them to, colonize me or the world,
Yeah.
but I get what's actually happening for them, which is a movement of the evolution of their consciousness into a world that's more organized than the previous one.
And it's also about raising one's vibration.
Yes, it's
right?
a higher vibe, absolutely, than
Higher
the previous one.
vibrational frequency.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
And if we look at these stages, it's the move from warrior, which is might is right and power is where it's at. The idea of surrendering and, repenting, and that's big progress. And we see that even in terms of current events where, a time-honored strategy for, wild teenagers is going into the military. That there's actually a place for, in prisons perhaps, for programs that are religious.
Yeah.
Because that would be the next stage. That would civilize, that would organize them into the next stage of development.
I was listening to a podcast last night with Michael Moore interviewing Sean Penn.
Oh.
And Sean Penn said that teenagers, once they get out of high school, I guess, or whatever, or maybe it's college, I don't remember the age exactly that he was pointing to, but that the next step is service, whether it's military service or Peace Corps or, helping out in a soup kitchen or something. It needs to be service so that they can identify with giving and with being valuable and valued, and making a contribution. And I think that's what we leave out as a culture
We do. Yeah.
in terms of teenagers.
Yeah,
There's
we it
starting to
helps
be
us
more
see
calls for it, though.
What's that?
There's starting to be more calls for it.
Oh, that's good.
But slowly but surely, you're starting to hear some politicians talk about it and authors talk about it. And so it's slow, but it's out
I
there.
agree.
That's
Yeah, I agree. I see more understanding and realization of that. Also, just to go think about the tribal stage, just ritual. This
Yeah,
idea of initiation
exactly.
into various stages of life. Teenagers don't get that. They're adrift. These are important. Again, our future progeny will look back on us as being, those were the soulless people.
Wasting those years.
Yeah.
It's the most passionate time.
Yes,
It's
sexy, passionate, juicy.
and that has to be channeled. That has to be, in a positive ways, but it's
Recognized.
not channeled in negative ways. Right.
Absolutely, and often turned on themselves.
Yeah.
They don't know who they are.
Right.
That's so. All of these stages can be mined for their great gifts that have been repressed or left behind, or that's part of the project of Integral.
Yeah. So what stage would that be to think about, setting up some kind of service for teenagers to participate in?
Well, it can happen at any stage. Of course, traditionalists do that, and sometimes they do that pretty well.
Yeah.
Modernists, they'll have certain kind of initiation into science and camps in college. In a way, I feel like my 4 years of college was an initiation into modernity. I wish it had been more explicit, but it was.
Mm-hmm.
And then, there's certain initiations that we have into postmodernity too. But as you, I think, pointed out a minute ago, Gloria, and we can see this among our peers who are mostly progressives, postmodern people, that our kids, we often, we didn't want to install the discipline of traditionalism. That's one of the things that traditionalism does, is you set your ego aside. Ego was the previous stage. And so you surrender your ego
Higher cause.
to something bigger.
Yeah.
So you sit down and shut up.
Yeah.
And you do what you're told.
Yeah.
And we didn't want to do that to our kids.
I did.
So there's a piece of the strata missing that, a lot of the younger people are realizing that and reinstalling it themselves. That's great. And, we'll figure it out, but that is, we could see that happened.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, social media is doing a lot of damage to a lot of kids.
Yeah.
In the teen years.
And that's really coming to be realized.
Yes, it is. It's hard to stop, but it's really injuring a lot of children.
Yeah. I have a thought on that, but I wanted to, Sharon, I saw you raised your hand, and was there something you wanted to point to?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on curiosities come up a couple of times. And is anyone familiar with Ted Lasso, the TV show? It's won a lot of awards.
Yeah, one big time at the Emmys.
Yeah, there was an
I'm
episode.
familiar with it. I have not watched it. Have you?
I have, yeah.
What do we think?
I like it. It's very different. I think I don't watch a ton of shows, but I think it's, the reason I bring it up is there was an episode in the first season where he talks about curiosity. There's a dart game, and it's all part of that conversation and the importance of it. So I just wanted to share that because I like it when things that I hear in a setting like this, I see them pop up in pop culture too. And I love when I see that crossover. And then the main character, I think his name's Jason Sudeikis. That's the actor.
Yeah.
I saw an interview with him, and he made a reference to kind of the body being a vessel, which led me to believe that he maybe would subscribe to a lot of what we've talked about here tonight. And I just again, I like it when I sort of see that crossover because I don't always expect that from people in Hollywood. So it's nice to hear Sean Penn, and it's nice to hear Jason Sudeikis say some of these things because I think through their art, they're trying to help us move forward slowly. So
Yes.
No,
Well-
and people, oh, go on, Gloria, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just thinking, what Natalie said about social media being so damaging, to kids, to teenagers. I mean, it leads to suicide often. And I think we need to figure out what is it that is driving that, what is it that is driving that kind of hurtful, because there's got to be a need
Yeah.
that is expressed. It's just like, when I think about, this whole idea of this whole capitalist idea of eternal growth, that we always have to be making more and buying more, like you were pointing out in the beginning. And I thought about that, and I thought, there are limits to that because we live in a finite world, right? But as humans, we have this innate need to grow, right? Only it's a spiritual, on a spiritual level, there is no limit, right? But when that's not happening, when we're not growing inside, we externalize it and project it, and it's the material world that has to grow. So there's got to be some kind of need, that is being misplaced in this kind of social media attack. That.
Yeah, I think that's well said, and Natalie, I think you're right to point it out. There's there's a need. There's the materialism is part of it. There's also a part of it that's just built into humanity, and that is what we were talking about earlier: the need to be seen, the need to connect, the need for affiliation with other people. We just can't get enough of each other. That's just built in. So it's almost like if you think of, for most of human history, life was organized around a search for calories. Okay? So everybody spent all their time with that for 1,000 years. And then all of a sudden, about 100 years ago, we got all the calories we needed. We got the agribusiness. We developed, the means to do that. And so all of a sudden, the problem now is not a dearth of calories, but a surplus of calories. And we have diabetes and obesity, and we're getting sick over it, and blah, blah, blah. So that's just the deep need to eat, and salt, sugar, and satiation, and all that stuff has to be, we have to get hip to that. And we are, so people are controlling themselves, and, there's a lot more intelligence around that. There's also government can participate with that. In a way, social media it's a very similar thing. Yeah. So deeply built into humanity is this need to connect and to be seen and to get curious about each other and relate.
Then we have to provide more constructive ways for them.
We have the junk food of that. We have just all of it that we could possibly ever want. And there are kids, and me sometimes, where I'm just like Skinner's pigeon, just pecking at my screen. Mm-hmm. And, at some point, and we can even see this among young people, there's a reaction to that. And that's beginning to form too, where younger people are having parties where they put their phones down, and nobody, but that's a sort of a natural, healthy response to this idea that this is making me sick. All of this information, all of these opinions, all of these likes and not likes, and am I being seen? And this one and that one's got more, and it's like people are getting wise to it. That's evolution, actually. Now, I do think there's a role for government to play, and just public opinion, which we see a cresting disgust with these last couple surveys that showed how depression and anxiety, particularly among teenage girls, is just off the charts, and boys too, I think, but girls off the charts. And that the algorithms have to change. Something has to change. There has to be some things that are imposed. I don't know what. Welcome to evolution. Welcome to the arena of fighting this out. But this is, so I do want to, make those points. And I also want to make one other point, and that is the amazing fruitfulness of social media. Yeah. And if we talk about creating this morphic field, I mean, all of the Taliban's grandchildren are online. They're on Reddit.
Wow.
They're on Facebook. And that is, it's hard to overestimate the evolutionary potency of being able to connect with other people all over the world and to drink of their worldviews and cultures. So, welcome to the geyser of beautiful but not pretty. Natalie?
Would you say more about how creativity plays a role in advancing our evolution?
Yeah. Well, all these stages are a new realization. So the realization at integral, once we sort of exit first tier, is there's nothing wrong here. I don't have to fix anything. This is the spiral of development. It's not pretty. It's beautiful, but not pretty. And at this point, what I can do is I can co-create, because I can see evolution. I can see it in the culture. I can see it in the cosmos. I can see it in myself. And once I can see it, I can participate in it. And so that itself is a creative act. That is the act of joining the creative force of the universe, and realizing that I'm being lived, but I'm also in charge here of living my life. And both things are true. And, I'm just grateful, So does that make sense? Or do you have any thoughts on it yourself?
Well, I was thinking, it's sort of a flow of ideas, but I think Sharon introduced the topic, and then Gloria kind of emphasized some of it, but just how much spillover there is of obvious consciousness into the media, and I would add the arts, and a film. We like PBS's spotlight called Canvas. There are artists who are bringing forth sort of social justice topics in their art. Two fabulous, wonderful documentaries that we've seen recently one is The Hidden Life of Trees, and the other one is Fabulous Fungi.
Oh, yes.
And both of them
I saw the second one.
show the interrelatedness and the consciousness of these plant lives.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes, not to mention what happens to you when you take them.
Yeah, we wouldn't have seen these 30 years ago, I think. We would have seen some beautiful National Geographic wildlife shows, but nothing like like these.
Well,
Which,
Astonishing.
in the 70s, there was a book written by Clive Baxter, I think his name was, called The Secret Life of Plants.
Mhm.
oh, yes, I read that.
Talked
I did
about their consciousness.
It was the beginning
Yeah.
of this, you could, but there's a new fluorescing of it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is, and also there's much more exposure. It's not to a small audience. It's
Totally. Oh my God.
anybody who wants to access these marvelous.
No, I
things.
call my Uncle Blaine. He's 90. He was a truck
Oh.
driver all his life. He lives in Western Pennsylvania, never left town. And we have the most interesting conversations about the documentaries he's seen.
Mm.
And, he's educated in a way that he could never have predicted by this. And so is everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody, and it's so broad.
Judge Judy, the most popular daytime television show, little morality plays where, red is civilizing red, in a way. And, these kinds of things really they're downloads of consciousness that are hard to overestimate, even though they have their downsides, and we can gorge on them too much. And,
Well, it's like fire. Fire is a tool.
Yeah.
It can be used to warm your home. It can be used in a
turn it down.
way, right? But the technology has, potential that supersedes every other, civilization prior, only because we can reach so many more people. It's like the converse of the nuclear bomb, that we can kill so many more people, right? But there's always the two sides, and it depends on how we use it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that potential came out of the modern, stage.
Yes, exactly.
Have it.
Yeah.
And during the pandemic,
And YouTube and, all these way we're all connecting. I mean, people have these seminars and thousands of people come in and, and they don't have to fly everywhere. And now,
It's amazing.
It is.
Our
yeah.
conversation right now. I mean, I didn't have to leave my house. I don't have to be dressed from the waist down. You don't know that. I'm not telling you, but I don't have to be.
I know.
That's right. I know.
Well, another movie that comes to mind, a documentary based on Natalie's comments, is My Octopus Teacher.
Oh,
I saw that. It's great.
Yeah,
love
that's
it.
another one that 20 years ago or 30, it's hard to imagine it would have.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, I was taught about anthropomorphizing animals when I was in college.
Right.
That they don't have consciousness like we do. They don't have feelings like we do. I mean, it's crazy to think that in one generation, that is, completely superseded by My Octopus Teacher, where that's an I thou relationship,
Yeah. Yeah.
between him and that octopus.
Yeah.
And that's thrilling and evolutionarily potent.
Yeah.
And it won the Academy Award. So, I like pointing out where, this kind of stuff is getting accepted and there's great movement.
Mm-hmm.
Ted Lasso, from what I know, it's an explicit move beyond the aesthetics of postmodernity, which tend to be ironic, distanced, cynical, critical. This is the aesthetic of postmodernity.
Mm-hmm.
And Ted Lasso is about transcending that to goodness and truth and honesty, and but it's not that naive. It's not a naive move back. It's
there are contradictions. Just
Okay.
like we talked about tonight, there are throughout the show, there are good contradictions of some of the characters. You see this positive side, and then, like all of us, there are these uglier sides.
Yeah, right on.
It embraces both of those.
Yeah.
This is who these people are. It's both of these things. Yeah.
But not seen in a way that is condemning or cynical.
Right.
If I'm right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm eager to see it. I've seen one episode, but I wanted to get a little more into it. I'm eager to see Asimov's Foundation. That's about to come out on Apple TV. So there's so much great stuff. Oh my God.
On too many streaming platforms, though.
Too many platforms.
I mean, you could go broke just subscribing to.
You can indeed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Nikki.
What
Right,
about yours? This has been.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, I wanted to, I noticed in the write-up for this thing, you talked about the next human being born now, something about, I forget how it was turned, but you're saying that there could be these human being, new infants born right now that have this evolved consciousness, right? That's what you were talking about? Okay. Because I just remembered something we were talking about, just reminded me of that in your presentation intro. And I thought that's another thing that intrigued me too, because I'm actually a nanny, right? So that's what I'm doing nowadays. And in my kind of sunset career. And, I get to be with all these beautiful little creatures, and they're just,
my goodness.
and even though part of me really is, because I've been an activist for years too, and I know Judith from activist circles, and part of me thinks, oh my God, we have to act in 10 years or the planet, or what's going to happen, we're going to be wiped out by all these natural disasters. But then there's these beautiful children, and, and I want to be hopeful too, that again, their spirits have evolved here, and came here. Their souls chose to be born at this time to those parents, and who knows what they're going to be doing. And that gives me hope,
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah.
No, it's amazing when I think where I was as a teenager thinking versus teenagers today. I mean, it's not all upside, but oh my God, it mostly is, I have to say. I mean, one of my things, I'm kind of a lurker on Reddit, where you could go watch these conversations from the Muslims and everybody, all thousands of different communities just having these discussions. And I'm astonished at the wisdom of people in general, actually, is the advice they give each other on relationships and sexuality and culture and so forth. And lots of arguments, but lots of intelligence, and particularly among the kids. Unbelievable. So I'm excited about that. That's where I don't want to die. That, and I want to see what comes out of Apple next. I mean, I hate to think I'm going to miss that. But other than that, so I see we're at the end of our time, right, Gloria?
Yes, we are.
And I wondered if I might read a poem that I think is a transmission of integral consciousness.
Wonderful.
And is there anything we want to say before, or any?
Just to thank you
Yeah.
from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah, my great privilege.
Being here today.
Thank you,
so much.
Jeff.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's really fun. I really enjoyed you.
Yeah.
Our time together. So this is from Walt Whitman, and Walt Whitman is, to me, an integral being, and again, there are saints and sages through history that have these spikes into these higher stages, for sure. And this is from Song of the Open Road. This is written back in the 1860s, during the Civil War, actually, if you can imagine. And this is one stanza from that. Song of the Open Road. He writes, "From this hour I ordain myself, loosed of limits and imaginary lines, going where I list, my own master, total and absolute. Yet, listening to others, considering well what they say, pausing, searching, receiving, contemplating, and then gently, but with undeniable will, divesting myself of the holds that would hold me, I inhale great draughts of space. The east and the west are mine, and the north and the south are mine. I am larger, better than I thought. I did not know I held so much goodness. All seems beautiful to me. Henceforth, I ask not for good fortune. I am my own good fortune. Henceforth, I whisper no more, whimper no more, postpone no more, need nothing. Strong and content, I travel the open road.
Beautiful,
Isn't that something?
beautiful.
Walt?
It is.
And that it has that faith and hope and heartiness and good wholeheartedness that I think is a feature. It's the post-ironic, it's post-cynical.
The
And
spiritual connection.
yeah,
He's spiritually connected
yeah,
to
very transmissive.
that which has no need of anything. Is
Yeah,
complete.
yeah. Yeah, baby.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Walt. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jeff.
Interesting.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks,
See you next
Gloria.
time.
Thanks,
All right,
Jeff.
folks.
Jeff, I'm going to explore some other things you've been doing. I'm so
Super.
glad
Yeah,
I
check
found
out
out
the
about
Daily
this.
Evolver. Yeah, or the Post-Progressive Post.
Check
That's
into it. Yeah.
The website.
all
That is
right.
amazing.
Bye-bye.
Bye, folks.
Bye-bye now.